All right, it's 1 o'clock on 10/26/2022, 1300 for you military types. Let's get moving because I got a lot of stuff to cover, and yeah, it's going to be busy. First off, anytime you see an organization that has a breach and then there's stuff that follows on back from it, usually it's knee-jerk reaction, and they go off and go, we have limited the scope of this breach, and whatever else. I don't really know what's the best policy to take, or approach rather to take to get ahead of it, because you're trying to defend the brand and etc. and trying to let your customers know. Great, but it seems like it should be one of those things of, let's just put a notification out that we have indications of compromised activity, further investigations in process, and kind of roll with that. And then when you actually have verifiable, validated sort of scope of what's going on, then you come out. So there's an organization in Australia, Medibank, that's had a big time thing go on. They came out early, and I'll get through some of the dates here with basically Medibank, the Australian health insurance company, which initially claimed to have foiled a ransomware attack. And this was a few days ago. Today is October 26th. The 24th, 2 days ago, was when they were saying that they had foiled a ransomware attack, saying it had found no evidence customer data has been removed from our network. Has now confirmed that criminals had access to all of the personal data of its customers. In a statement on Wednesday, today, the company announced that its cybercrime investigations found the attackers had access to significant amounts of health claims data alongside the personal details it held about current and former customers. We have evidence that the criminal has removed some of this data, and is now likely that the criminal has stolen further personal and health claims data, the company said. The company's shares dropped 18%, wiping around 1.7 billion Australian dollars, 1.1 billion US from the company's market value. Publicly listed, Shaka. Medibank was formerly government owned before being privatized, is not for profit 2014. 3.7 million customers in Australia, and reported revenue of about 6 billion Australian dollars, 4.3 US billion. Now comes the corporate statement. Our priority is to continue to work with the things that are going on, and et cetera, and we will be better defended in the future and whatever. But let's go through that, right? So Medibank should be locked down. Like, if you're familiar with what goes on breach side of things, like, Medibank should be locked down. So without getting myself in trouble or doing anything illegal, let's just say that there's things for this organization that should be locked down, like basic level firewall type controls on a very specific port, without getting myself in trouble, that should not be exposed to the open internet, especially when you're responding to a breach system. Now, I mean, anybody in this space understands that these are big problems, and it's not like you hit a button and everything is locked up or whatever. But if you look at an organization and you can find fundamental basic flaws on the overall configuration side of it, and they've got breach action going on, what does that mean? Like, why wasn't this taken care of before? Why is this not being taken care of the way that it ought to right now? So without getting myself in trouble, this is kind of hard to do because I have to like say what I want to say without getting myself in big doo-doo. This organization should go, I'm telling you, people should go look at their configuration side of this. And it took me about 90 seconds to find this. You have a vulnerable thing on the internet. Go fix it. Go fix it. Go check it, because what's available right now in this configuration, your breach is not over. I'll just put it that way. Go look. Customers of this particular organization, ask them to go look. Interestingly enough, while doing some other looking around, I found something that I thought was interesting, and I can say this out loud because they're kind of a combatant nation, I guess you could call them. Looking for people that misconfigured SSH servers that were talking to things in foreign countries. Iran, interestingly enough, was able to find a misconfigured SSH server with default configuration talking to the internet inside of the Islamic Republic of Tehran. Tehran, I'm not good at saying this type of stuff, but I think that that's relatively okay. So here it is. I'm looking at it right now. And the best thing is it's got no authentication, not even username and password, but this is SSH server with things logged in as root inside of, and it's probably a hot box or something like that, jump server, that type of deal, inside of the Islamic Republic of Tehran. Not that I'm going to tell them to go fix it, but if they might be listening, I don't know. You should go look at this because this is bad. I don't know what's on the back end because I'm not trying to get myself arrested in Iran or whatever. But yeah, go do that. Let's talk a little more on kind of, so those are the easy things, found those simple, whatever. I do this every week. Nobody seems to really do much about it, but hey, I'm going to keep trying because it is what it is. I put out something before on TikTok as far as like delete this app, and there were some folks that said yes, some folks said no, whatever. It's an app. If you want to use TikTok, by all means. It's the beauty of the American experiment is you can do whatever the hell you want to do. Use it. However, if you go look in Forbes, there's a pretty good article that talks about, and let me make sure I quote this correctly, TikTok parent ByteDance plan to use TikTok to monitor the physical location of specific American citizens. So step away from the other stuff that goes on with TikTok that people talk about, grooming and whatever else, and just stupid dance videos. And like, let's talk about this targeting thing. And this is the article. This was published on October 20th by Emily Baker White. A project assigned to a Beijing-led team would have involved accessing location data from some, and that's the key thing I think here, some U.S. users' devices also without their knowledge or consent. A China-based team at TikTok's parent company ByteDance planned to use the TikTok app to monitor the personal location of some specific American citizens, according to materials reviewed by Forbes. The team behind the monitoring project, ByteDance's internal audit and risk control department, is led by Beijing-based executive Song Ye, who reports to the CEO, Rubo Liang. The team primarily conducts investigations into potential misconduct by current and former ByteDance employees, but in at least 2 cases, the internal audit team also planned to collect TikTok data about the location of U.S. citizens who had never had an employee relationship with the company, the materials show. It is unclear from the materials whether data about these Americans was actually collected. However, the plan was for Beijing-based ByteDance team to obtain location data from U.S. users' devices. So, of course, TikTok doesn't, do anything or say anything or whatever else because that's whatever. But I mean, the reality of it is that certain applications, certain apps are when they're headquartered and founded and ran by an organization in a country that is openly or clandestinely or whatever you want to look at it, hostile towards the United States, they're going to use that data for other purposes. Maybe they're malicious, maybe they're not. I would say this is probably potentially malicious, but maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Regardless, know that you're the target, know that they're coming to try and leverage that type of information. And it's not for advertising purposes. Typically, people are willing to go, you know what, fuck it. If I can get, some free shit and whatever else, then okay, send me some ads. This is not ads targeting. This is looking for physical location of users without their knowledge based on them using TikTok. This should be troubling to folks. So if you've ever had a reason to not let your kids use TikTok, to not use TikTok yourself, whatever else, go read this article. And when you get through it, you're going to be kind of shocked. I would say this is just further evidence of why not to leverage or use TikTok. Do your stupid dance videos on something else. I don't know. Record them and post them on YouTube or whatever. But this is surveillance state stuff. This is risky. This is not in line with the American Constitution and search and seizure and all the other stuff. And also, if you're a privacy person and you use TikTok, you're kind of full of shit, in my opinion. So do that. You know what I'm saying? All right, moving on. But there was an article that was talking about how hard it was for an organization to get past compliance within cyber. This is an article in Bloomberg Law. It was published October 26th by Sky Whitley. Enhanced rail cyber standards offer fodder for negligence claims. Now, this is the first time that I can recall seeing something show up in what I would call reliable media information that talks about negligence. Updated cybersecurity requirements for railroad operators adopted Monday that raise the standard of care rail companies must meet to fulfill cybersecurity regulations could invite both enforcement actions and private litigation. A directive, and I have the directive here in a minute, and I'm going to read it, some of it to you because it's kind of funny, released by the Transportation Security Administration may bolster the agency's ability to assign liability to companies accused of not meeting industry security standards, but it doesn't significantly change the litigation risks facing the railway sector, attorneys with expertise in the area say. Let's see. The security directive is part of a larger effort by the Biden administration to better protect critical infrastructure sectors after breaches like last year's Colonial Pipeline hack laid bare the potentially devastating consequences of inadequate cybersecurity. I would say we've been knowing about that for quite a while, but hey, sometimes you got to wake people up by slapping them in the face. The TSA's first round of directives targeted the pipeline sector. If you haven't read those, go read them. Its next one later this year will target the aviation industry. Oh, thank God we're finally mandating cybersecurity for the aviation industry. It's only 2022. Each set of existing directives was developed with extensive input from industry stakeholders and federal partners, according to the TSA. So that being said, I went and downloaded the directives here and I've read through it because I have no life and nothing else to do. It's pretty bare bones when you look at it. So number Security Directive 1580-82-2022-01, subject rail cybersecurity mitigation actions and testing, which it doesn't talk about any of that. Applicability, each freight railroad carrier identified in 49 CFR 1580-101 and other TS. So any carrier basically. And here's the authority, 49 US Code 114, et cetera, et cetera. Talks about purpose and information. Okay, fine. And then it says, here's where it gets kind of funny. If you think about we're in 2022 and this is what we're mandating now. To protect against the ongoing threat to the United States national economic security, the Security Directive mandates that these railroad owner operators implement the following cybersecurity measures to prevent disruptions to their infrastructure. Establish and implement a TSA-approved cybersecurity implementation plan. Has anyone run into the TSA cybersecurity implementation plan? I'm not sure that I have, but let's table that for now. Implement network segmentation policies and controls to ensure that the operational technology system can continue safely to operate in the event that an IT system has been compromised. So cut IT off of OT. Okay, super. Implement access control measures to prevent unauthorized access to critical cyber systems. Holy shit, I would hope that would have happened a long time ago. Continuous monitoring and detection. I would really hope that would happen a long time ago. Reduce the risk of exploitation of unpatched systems through the application of security patches. So patch your stuff. Again, super basic things. Establish an assessment program and submit an annual plan to TSA that describes how the owner-operator will proactively and regularly assess the effectiveness. Sections 2 to blah, 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 blah. Now, on top of that, there's actions that are required. And you got to remember that this is not going towards a cybersecurity company or an MSP or an MSP. This is going towards people that move freight, that do rail stuff. And here's the TSA saying you got to do these things or something is going to happen. Now, why I said this is kind of comical is it doesn't really talk about what's going to happen. Talks about the actions required, talks about who has to do what, the implementation plan. And this is where they say this is the implementation plan, but it's not really an implementation plan. No later than 120 days after the effective date of this directive, owner-operators must submit an implementation plan to this email address. The implementation plan must provide all the information required in these sections, blah, blah, blah. Once approved by TSA, the owner-operator must implement and maintain all measures in the TSA-approved plan. Right? So I'm not going to read through the rest of this because it's fucking boring, but if you go look through this, you'll be surprised at what's actually in here. And again, the problem is that it's not that this is a bad idea, but it's that they've said, here, go do these things. I'm requiring it. I'm mandating for you to do it. Oh, but by the way, there's not really any teeth to this. We're going to define a bunch of stuff and we're going to let you come up with the particular plan. And then you submit it to us and we'll approve it so that we have different things for different organizations with no reliable standard across the entirety of the infrastructure. Like rail systems typically should do rail type things. Like this would not be an incredibly difficult problem to solve, but we're introducing more levels of complexity, more levels of bureaucracy, and it's not going to fix the problem. And again, there's literally nothing in here that says that a company can't look at this and be like, you know what, I don't have fucking time for this, and they just go off and do whatever. It doesn't say we're going to fine you. It doesn't say that we will send inspectors. It doesn't say that we will reduce your ability to operate, whatever, or tax incentives or nothing. It's just, here's a thing, you got to do it. You got 4 months to come up with something, and then it says or. It's like when you were a kid and your mom would say, don't do this, and you'd be like, or what? So this type of stuff doesn't help. It doesn't affect anything, to be perfectly frank. It's not that it's not worth the effort to try and cause change. That's good. But what change do you promote when people don't have a reason to change? Like if the doctor doesn't come in and say, you're sick, and if you don't do X and Y and Z, you're going to die, you're not going to change. You're just going to go, okay, well, can I have some medication and I'll continue doing what I'm doing, whatever else. Like, there's got to be teeth to this stuff. We need to quit coming up with more directives, more whatever. And guess what? There's already directives and requirements and specifications from different government organizations to do these types of things. We're just adding more to the more for the sake of more. I wanted to follow that up with, I'm not a big fan of compliance standards because I think that they don't actually fix the problem, and they're not technology, they're just standards. But I was wondering, like, how many compliance standards are there that we actually have to understand and know and deal with? Well, let's look at how many there are. If you look for the complete list of cybersecurity standards, and this is updated in 2022, cybersecurity standards, there's a lot. So there's ISMS, ISO 27000, Common Criteria, ISO IEC, CIS, ISO 22301, NIST, SANS, ISO 28000, OWASP, ISO 27037, PCI, Cloud Security Alliance, ISO 21434, ISO. That's on one list. On another list, there's 25 standards, 25 different things, frameworks and standards, right? Essential 8, CIS, CSA, CCM, COBIT, CISA, TSS, CMMC. Am I making you go brain dead yet? Because it's making me want to jump off of a bridge. ETSI, ENISA, FAIR, CSF, SOGP 2020, ISA 62443, CIPP or CIIP, IOTCA, IOTSF, ISO 27001, MITRE, CAF, PSR, CSF, SP 800-82, NERC. Now, not all of those things are applicable across all different verticals, whatever else, but the point I'm trying to make is there's so many of those things with so many things that interoperate and touch other things and are part of different compliance requirements. How are you supposed to keep up with this if you're just a regular everyday business? If you don't have people that are dedicated to it, how in God's name are you going to keep up with all this stuff? And then on top of that, they're introducing more. It's not, there's no, I do a lot of work on Capitol Hill. I can tell you that there are people up there right now that are talking about introducing additional legislation and additional compliance standards and requirements. And it reads just like that thing I talked about from the TSA. There's no teeth to it. It's just more shit to deal with. So is that going to help fix the problem for anybody? Like, we already have all that. PCI has been around for a long time. HIPAA's been around for a long time. COPA's been around for a long time. COBIT's been around for a long time. These standards have been there, but continuing to introduce additional stuff is just going to make it more complicated and achieve less actual outcomes. So I am not a compliance ninja. I'm not a GRC wizard or whatever else. I'm just saying, from the perspective of somebody that looks at this stuff in the market, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me to introduce more. Honestly, I think we need to boil off most of the bullshit that's out there and go back towards relatively intelligent-based, singular-ish standards that are enforceable. And don't tell me that those things are enforceable already, because people get breached and fined all the time. It doesn't matter. Like, GDPR was supposed to be the end of days for breaches. Didn't make a lick of difference, if you ask, right? I mean, seriously, think about it. Okay, so follow on to that. Let's talk about Fast Company, how the pizza 123 password could take out an organization. And this is Fast Company. Criminal hackers took responsibility for a recent Fast Company breach, saying they exploited an easily guessed default password pizza 123. The business magazine reused the weak password across a dozen WordPress accounts, according to the hackers who described their attack on the article fastcompany.com before the publication site was taken down. So when you're talking about this, the hackers claim to have used the vulnerable password pizza123 to access authentication tokens, API keys, simple email service, and then offensive push notification, whatever else. So basically, used a bad password, rip things to shreds, and caused bad things for them guys. But here's the thing: is this article talks about this as in Bleeping Computer. It talks about the problem with passwords and whatever else. It talks about people reusing passwords. Everybody's reused a password somewhere. I'm honest as hell. I'll tell you right now, I've reused passwords plenty of places. I don't reuse them on anything that I actually give a shit about, but I have reused passwords and I do have them out there just like anybody else right now. However, if you move towards using password managers and biometrics and those types of things, it makes life easier. I'll tell you that much. I have been relatively passwordless since January 1 of 2022. Life is good. I use a password manager. I have biometrics tied in everywhere. I don't enter passwords. If I have one password that I really need to know, and the rest of it's all based on biometrics and whatever else. And the passwords for things that are super important to me, they're like 32 characters and they're managed by my system. So like this is inexcusable. If they're able to get towards other things, like it should be someone should burn for this. It shouldn't be, oops, I fucked up, my bad. You know what I mean? Like this is not the way that we fix the problem. This article talks about password hygienes and manage, and it says flat out, this is what kind of irked me. 54% of organizations don't have a tool to manage work passwords. It's essential. That's a lame excuse. If you're an organization that doesn't have password managers, go get one. There's Dashlane, there's Microsoft, there's plenty of password managers. Go get one. That should be part of your overall security practice and protocol. Ready day one, period one, solve that problem. I got other shit to do than deal with passwords. I use a password manager. And guess what? If you're a private citizen and you're not using one, it's worth it. You spend a lot of money on dumb shit per year. Spend a little bit of money on a password manager. Eliminate a major avenue of risk. Like, there you go. I don't really understand why this continues to be a thing. I did want to talk about disinformation, misinformation, because the midterms are coming up here in the United States, which is an absolute kerfuffle, but it is what it is. Let's just real quickly run through this, and I want to see if we can see the trend in what we're talking. This is from Katie Teitler, I think her name is, Exonius. Cybersecurity's role in combating midterm election misinformation. So election security, don't want to talk about that, but she has a really good point here. As far as misinformation and disinformation are concerned, neither of those is a new concept. The practice of spreading mis and disinformation or fake news can be traced back as far as 27 BC, when the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus spread lies about his nemesis Mark Antony to gain public favor. So this is not new, right? Kind of like hacking passwords is not new, but that's been pretty far back. In just the past few weeks, a clerk in Mesa County, Colorado, entered a not guilty plea for charges relating to alleged involvement with election tampering of equipment. She, alongside a colleague, are being held accountable for providing access to an unauthorized individual who copied hard drives and accessed passwords for a software security update. The accused clerks publicly spread disinformation about the election security prior to the incident. In Georgia, election officials recently decided to replace voting equipment after forensic experts hired by a group copied numerous components of equipment, including software and data. It has not been found that the outcome of the elections was impacted, but the fact that compromises sow the seeds of doubt begs the question, could that stolen data be used again to influence elections? Back in February of 2022, election officials in Washington state decided to remove intrusion detection software from voting machines, claiming the devices were part of a conspiracy theory to spy on voters. And unfortunately, the preponderance of public platforms on which anyone, anywhere can voice an opinion, even if there is no shred of factual information, makes it simple for a voice to be heard. that result is constant public question about the veracity of information and data on the internet, which is very true. And I get the ridiculousness of using the platform to talk about platforms, but the way that it talks about combating disinformation. So let's see if this sounds familiar. Monitor infrastructure, test and assure all systems are secure, verify who has access to systems, applying machine learning, those types of things. So is it possible to combat mis and disinformation with technology and keep this whole thing a little bit more safe and secure, and hopefully help with the outcomes of a safe and secure and fair election? I hope so. But the point, I think, is that we proactively have to, number one, manage the apparatus and take care of it, which it seems like there's people engaged in that. But the other side of it is people need to make sure that we continue to talk to family members and others, and just say, if you hear something, take a second and ask the question. Like, it's okay to question what you read on the internet from anybody, on any party, on any side, whatever else, any candidate, whatever. It's okay to question things and not just buy stuff hook, line, and sinker and then dive in on. The internet's full of lies and bullshit. The internet's also full of great information, wonderful people, and amazing truths, but you've got to discern it for yourself. So I'm not going to get into the politics side of things, but the misinformation, disinformation, election compromise, whatever, it's all real and it's all bouncing around. People have to be smart about this, and I hope that they would be smart enough to understand that they have to have an approach and be realistic about what they read and understand that. I know that that's a bridge too far for a lot of people, but it's really honestly part of my solemn hope. Now, lastly, with a few minutes left here, there's an article in Ed Week by Allison Klein on October 24th. Home internet for students or district cybersecurity. Where should the money go? I think that's a chicken or egg question. So how can you have home internet for students in school districts if you don't have security? Or what good is it to have people use the internet in an insecure fashion? I know for a fact the school district that my kids go to during the height of COVID, it was hit with ransomware twice. And there was kids were basically told just to chill out and wait till he got the system back up. And that happened not once, but twice. And that was also after offering free help to try and get them fixed. But anyway, there's some interesting things in this article that talk about where money's being allocated and where it's going. I'm of the mind that it doesn't make sense to offer people internet connectivity for remote school and those types of things without having mandates and requirements in place for the way in which that infrastructure is built, for the fact that it helps people be more secure and do what they need to do online. Reality says that if you're doing things for children, there is a compliance requirement that we should know about called COPA that has to do with how you manage children's information. So if you're a school district that doesn't invest in security, doesn't take care of that information, aren't you violating the COPA requirement just by the very nature of allowing those connections to occur? Isn't that problematic? I think that that's a question that should be asked. And if you're a parent and you've got kids that are using the internet at home for school, I would ask the question of how are those machines secured and how is my kid's information being managed, maintained, and controlled? I know I've asked it and I didn't get a good answer. So, ask those questions. You're right in being able to ask those questions, and you, as the parent, have the right to figure out what's going on with your kids and their information. And this is from a guy that built an app to help kids have encrypted communications years ago, that because no one wants to invest in children's encrypted apps, it didn't go anywhere, but it is what it is. So that's a lot of ground to cover. Compliance, railways, directives, bullshit legislation, blah, blah, blah. SSH servers in Iran. Those types of things. It's a crazy week. More is coming. Buckle up. Question what you hear on the internet. Be smart. Be safe. And above all, be secure. And I will catch you on the next one.